this really is the most important election. Like, we are going to have this opportunity, we think, to go in and get legislation done so we can stop the regulatory challenges and have a pathway forward.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unchained, your no-hype resource for all things crypto. I'm your host, Laura Shin, author of The Cryptopians. I started covering crypto 9 years ago, and as a senior editor at Forbes, was the first mainstream reporter to cover cryptocurrency full-time. This is the October 29th, 2024 episode of Unchained. Polkadot is the original and leading Layer 0 blockchain with over 2,000 plus developers. And the Polkadot 2.0 upgrade will be a massive accelerator for the ecosystem, making it faster, more secure, and adaptable. Perfect for GameFi and DeFi to build, grow, and scale. Join the community at polkadot.network/ecosystem/community. Mantle's METH is now the fourth largest LST with $1.3 billion in TVL. METH offers holders cumulative incentives and airdrops, in addition to native ETH POS yields. This includes exclusive rewards like Eigen and Cook. Check it out at meth.mantle.xyz/campaigns. Robinhood Wallet, Robinhood's DeFi mobile app, takes no fees on same-chain and cross-chain swaps. Use Arbitrum's Layer 2 to swap with low network fees in just a few taps. Other fees may apply. Download on iOS or Android today. Today's topic is how the various congressional races could affect crypto. Here to discuss are Kristin Smith, CEO of the Blockchain Association, and Alex Grieve, VP of Government of Paradigm. Welcome, Kristin and Alex.
It's great to be here, Laura.
Thanks for having us, Laura. It's great to be with Kristin. We spend a lot of time together, so it's always a pleasure to meet again over Zoom.
We're in the last week before the election, and while the crypto community has been paying close attention to the presidential race, there's been a whole host of other contests that could also affect crypto. Before we dive into the specifics on these various races, let's also just talk generally about the importance of Congress for crypto. In this particular election, what would you say is at stake for the industry? What could the industry get or not get, depending on how these races go? And Kristin, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, no, Laura, you're absolutely right. This election is incredibly important for crypto. I mean, I think, as you know, and we've been talking about for years, over the past 3.5 years, particularly with the SEC, the crypto industry has just faced an unprecedented level of hostility. And I think we've finally turned the corner on towards that hostility and are now entering a friendlier phase. I think we made a lot of progress this year with Congress and thinking about market structure legislation and stablecoin legislation. And I think when the new Congress comes in next year, we'll be able to get that framework into place so that we no longer have to deal with the regulation by enforcement approach that we've been having to deal with over the past couple of years.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I know the industry obviously would very much welcome that. And Alex, what do you think? What would you say is the import of these different congressional races?
So first off, I would just like to start by saying that any partisan views that I may express today are my own personal ones and not necessarily the views of Paradigm. I grew up in kind of Republican politics and I worked for Speaker of the House John Boehner on the Hill and in financial policy and crypto policy since. But we have both strong Republicans and Democrats at Paradigm. And so we try to dig really, really far into all the legislation, all of these races on both sides of the aisle. Kristin nails it, I think. This is going to be the most pro-crypto Congress that we have ever had, this coming Congress. I mean, it's pretty undeniable the impact that the industry has had this cycle, not just the races that the super PACs have been spending in, but also some of the kind of more underreported ones in safe blue or red seats. I think couple good examples. Sam Liccardo, who's running for Congress in California. He's the former mayor of San Jose. And he was actually the one who integrated Helium's decentralized wireless into the city for free wireless for everyone. On the other side of the aisle, Riley Moore, who's in West Virginia, he's current state treasurer. He oversaw a bunch of coal mines being repurposed for Bitcoin mining. So it's pretty clear that just across the board, crypto has grown, crypto's influence has grown, and there are more pro-crypto candidates running that will be in Congress next year than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, I did want to touch on this because I am sure you guys have seen the coverage. A lot of people are making, hay of the fact that I guess the biggest financial influence in this election has been crypto money. And, some view that as negatively because it's not always disclosed, but then obviously it is having this effect. So yeah, just what are you seeing in terms of like the reactions to that?
Yeah, no, this is a bazooka. We have the world's largest super PAC, right? This is not a normal tool that industries have, and crypto has decided to go all in on this. So I would love to take a few minutes to talk about Fairshake, the super PAC that is funded by the crypto industry, and just sort of talk about what it's doing. I think Alex kind of alluded to some of the new sort of bipartisan group of members that we're going to have coming into Congress, but Fairshake has played a huge role in this. I do want to say I don't control the Fairshake PAC. The Fairshake PAC wasn't my idea, but as somebody who represents the industry in Washington, that presence of the super PAC is very much noticed by offices on Capitol Hill, and the crypto money is a big part of the conversation. And members of Congress who are, have to run for reelection, and it's expensive to do that. And there's always third-party influencers coming in. They're very interested in understanding who the people are in the crypto space, how they can get to know about it better, because they see this as something that could be very helpful to them or very hurtful to them if they're against crypto. And so we're at a level of discussion that I've never seen as an industry in Washington right now because of it. But I think what's been really interesting about Fairshake is they've done some non-traditional things. I mean, first, it's a very large size PAC, right? And it is all fully disclosed. There's a lot of money in campaigns that happen through these C4 organizations that are much less disclosure, but this is like out in the open, who contributed money going into the PAC. You also know, where all of those contributions are going to. It's all publicly disclosed. And I think what they did was interesting is they looked at these sort of open seats, like Alex was saying. These are districts where the current congressman has retired and stepped away, and there was going to be somebody new coming in. And what they did is they often played in the primaries, which usually you don't have third-party money coming in to primary elections because people don't want to, help pick the winner or loser. But what crypto did is they helped pick the winner or loser. And now those winners are, very grateful for having that sort of help early on in the process. Then what Fairshake has done in the general elections, and I guess in the primaries as well, is they have helped candidates who have been very pro-crypto in Congress. They have said, hey, we have these leaders in key committees who have been very helpful, who have taken time to get to know this space, and they have gone in and supported their campaigns. I think most notably what the PAC has done is they have gone after candidates who have been very anti-crypto. So I think most notably Sherrod Brown, who is the current sitting chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, Fairshake is spending about $40 million in favor of his opponent in an effort to unseat him. So these are obviously really, really big bets. But I think it's a very aggressive strategy. It's very different. I don't think most industries would have the stomach or the appetite for this level. And I think what ultimately, will happen is that, crypto will be taken seriously. We will no longer be sort of cast aside or, told that, oh, the agencies already have authority. People will look at us and say, all right, let's have a real conversation because, you're playing at a very high level and you're here to make sure that you get the framework you need and you're, willing to play the game to do it. So I'm excited about it because it makes my job easier. Again, I don't control it, but it's been a very, very aggressive strategy.
And how much have they spent on this election so far?
About $170 million.
Oh, okay. And just for context, like what is the second largest amount or like what's a typical amount that an industry would spend?
So there aren't really typical industry super PACs. I think the most comparable big effort is probably AIPAC, which is the pro-Israel PAC. But yeah, as Kristin said, we are the single largest non-presidential super PAC. So like the Donald Trump super PAC and the Kamala Harris super PAC are quite large, but ours is entirely focused on congressional races and quite sizable.
So I imagine like basically people are paying attention because of the money, but is there a sense of, I guess, so like you probably saw the New Yorker article about Fairshake, and there was a sense that the article kind of was trying to imply that, I don't know if like the word unfair, but just that these industries are like spending, just huge amounts to sway these elections. And like, they're not always, well, like, I guess, so for a lot of these ads, it's not totally clear who is running the ad. Like, for instance, one of the Fairshake affiliates is just called Defend American Jobs. So do you sense like, is there like any backlash to this amount of money coming from this industry, or do you really feel like it's just allowing, it's making people more open-minded? Because I could see it either way. I could see it being people just being pragmatic and being like, okay, we have to deal with these groups that have a lot of money. And then other people might say, whoa, this is, kind of just beyond the typical. And they're trying to like use money to get things that are maybe not like exactly what the electorate wants.
I mean, look, I think that this has allowed the industry to have its voice heard in Washington in a pretty like incontrovertible way. So it's very easy to read whatever kind of policy news outlet in DC over the past couple of years and read a bunch of anti-crypto things. And if your members of Congress have to deal with a huge variety of issues on any given day, and their staffers no different, it's really easy to just read the news and say, oh, well, crypto doesn't seem like something we need to care about, so I'm content to either not care or be actively against it. And this has kind of broken through that logjam where members have had to say, you know what, I'm going to take the time to dig in. And oftentimes what they find is a lot to like. Democrats like how it expands access to financial services. Republicans like the kind of censorship resistance and individual financial liberty angle. Crypto is a nonpartisan technology. And so this has been like a very, very useful tool to have our voice heard.
Yeah, and I would say it's been really interesting too, because in past campaign cycles, we didn't have candidates who were running for Congress for the first time call us up on our main number at the Blockchain Association and said, hey, I'd like to learn about crypto. Like that never, ever happened. This year, we've had one, maybe two candidates a week who are coming by that want to sit down. Alex will come sometimes. We'll pull in other people from the industry. We'll just have a conversation about, hey, this is what we're building. This is what we're doing. And this kind of outreach from candidates and existing members of Congress as well, it's not happened at this level before. We've always had to be the ones kind of pushing to go meet with people. And now it's like completely reversed and it's the other way around. And so it's been just a really huge opportunity to do that kind of education. Again, we're not even to the policy issues with these folks yet, right? We're just trying to let them know why we're excited about crypto, what the industry is building, and let them know that there's it's important to keep this here in the United States at the very highest level. And it's wonderful to have these conversations with these candidates before they get to Congress, as opposed to having them get there and then taking several years before we get to them. And especially like if, as we saw this year, we actually are having votes on the floor of the House and the Senate on these issues. And so it's not just the committees of jurisdiction that are thinking about this now. It's like the whole of Congress. And we have, a really good head start with this new Congress in terms of having a more educated Congress to work with.
Yeah, I could see all of that being beneficial. And one other thing I wanted to ask was in that article, they seem to imply that both Democrats and Republicans are getting very upset because...
Yes. I mean, listen, I think at the end of the day, we will look back on this and be like, oh yeah, there were a few people that were upset, but the bigger picture is that, you want to talk to crypto, you want to be with crypto. I think, if you're Sherrod Brown and you're having $40 million spent for your opponent, of course you're upset, right? And at the primary level, it's a little bit different because you're usually supporting a Republican versus a Republican or a Democrat versus a Democrat. There's a lot at stake here. And just the reality is that this matters and that, there are consequences to the decisions crypto are making. So I think, we'll have to see how everything shakes out on election night and to know if this is going to work or not. But yeah, I think it's going to matter. But I don't know. Alex may have other thoughts.
Yeah, I think Paul Graywall was in an interview over the weekend, Coinbase's CLO, and I think put it really well, which is, look, win, lose, or draw, no matter what, crypto has won this election. There's going to be people who are mad at anything that you do in Washington, D.C. Deal making, if both sides are upset, that means that it's a pretty good deal. I think running for Congress and getting your issues and your voices heard is similar. We're making plenty of friends. You're going to make maybe a couple of enemies along the way, but I can't tell you how many members of Congress or candidates that I have talked to who are so grateful for the crypto industry for paying attention to their race and supporting them, whether that was a super PAC, whether that was executives just taking the time to meet. The industry has gotten so invested in the outcome of our democratic process. It's pretty remarkable. I think for the most part, Silicon Valley likes to say that it's across the country and DC should stay out of its business. And crypto, I think, learned a very hard lesson back in 2021 with the passage of the Infrastructure Act and the inclusion of the broker reporting rule that you can't ignore DC because sooner or later it comes knocking on your door. So we've fully learned our lesson. We've dove in.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting because just from the way that they described it, it definitely seems like the initial approach was, we'll be bipartisan. We'll just support whoever on either side is pro-crypto. But then, that ended up resulting in both sides getting very mad when their own members were being targeted. So before we dive into like all these different races, let's just talk about which committees and subcommittees are important for crypto and why. So just do a quick rundown of like which ones you guys are, typically pay attention to and what area of crypto policy they have an impact on.
Sure. So there's kind of 4 key committees, and there's a few kind of lesser but still important committees. The 4 key ones are the 2 financial services committees. So the Senate Banking Committee in the Senate and the House Financial Services Committee in the House. They oversee the SEC, all of the prudential regulators, so the OCC, the FDIC, and the Federal Reserve, the bank regulators. And then the House and Senate Agriculture Committees oversee the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, because ultimately it was commodity futures that kind of give rise to that agency. So it's interesting because on the one hand, you have 2 committees where all of the members there know that they're here to work on financial services issues. And on the ag committees, you have a bunch of members who join for agricultural issues. Some join because, they're from Chicago and derivatives are right in their backyard. And some of them join because they have dairy farmers in their district and they care a whole lot about them. So there's a very interesting kind of divide between the 2. And those are the 4 committees that I would say Kristin and I spend the majority of our time with. One step down from there is probably the House Energy and Commerce Committee and the Senate Commerce Committee, which have oversight over kind of like more broad technology issues. So all of the kind of platform, big tech issues, telecom, networks, energy, the FTC. So like NFTs kind of reside over at those 2 committees. And I think next Congress will probably see both of them dig in a little bit more and get more involved. And the last 2 committees are always important, but don't get a ton of attention. And that's the 2 tax writing committees. So in the Senate, that's the Senate Finance Committee. And the House, that's the House Ways and Means Committee. And next year is the expiry of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So next year is like tax Super Bowl. So regardless of what happens at kind of the top of the ticket, there's going to be some big tax fight. And crypto is probably going to have a role to play there as we try to keep ourselves, off the menu, to use DC parlance, and to also try and get some tweaks around the edges that could have really important and impactful outcomes for the industry.
Okay, so one other thing I think the audience should know before we dive into each of these different races and the different committees is, as far as I understand, there's a difference in the way Democrats determine committee chairmanship and how Republicans do. So, Kristin, can you explain that?
Yeah, and Alex, feel free to add anything I miss here. But yeah, Democrats tend to do a seniority system. And so what often happens is they go to the person who's been serving on the committee the most. They give that person the chair position, and that person would hold that seat for as long as they want. So like, for example, if we're looking at Maxine Waters, who's currently the ranking member on the Democratic side, she will likely continue to be the chair, and she will do so for as long as she serves in Congress. Republicans tend to do it differently. They usually have, often there's like a race between some of the more senior ones, and they end up selecting who will be the chair. So for example, with Patrick McHenry, it's unclear who's going to replace him as the Republican lead on the House Financial Services Committee. But whoever does get that position will only hold it for 6 years. And so, there's sort of term limits and Republicans tend to cycle through. But Alex, feel free to add anything I missed.
Yeah, it's interesting. On the House side, on the Republican side, you kind of have this horse race where you've got kind of a meritocratic process. Every chair, hopeful, comes in, gives their pitch to the steering committee, which is this kind of secretive body that oversees who gets named chair of each committee. And like your fundraising for your colleagues, how much you campaigned around the country to help your colleagues get elected, all factors into this process. All the different candidates who are running to be McHenry's successor are all relatively pro-crypto. Congressman French Hill was one of the lead authors of Fit 21 and actually was recently in the news because he helped secure the release of Tigran Gambaryan from Binance, who is held captive in Nigeria, I think. Andy Barr is one of the other lead candidates. He's been really dug into kind of the financial institutions angle of crypto. So he's really interested in stablecoin issuance and cutting down payment transaction costs and the like. And then Bill Huizenga, who's been on the committee for quite a long time and has overseen the cap markets subcommittee and overseen the SEC. And then Frank Lucas, who actually has chaired the Ag Committee too. So he's seen that kind of break between how the SEC and the CFTC overlap and how they fight, and how they disagree about who regulates what. So there are no real bad outcomes for crypto. Losing Chairman McHenry is obviously a loss because of how much he's prioritized our industry, but anyone who replaces him will be able to work with. On the Senate side, I think it's important to point out that the outcome of who controls what chamber has a huge impact on who chairs the committee. So right now, Democrats control the Senate, and Sherrod Brown is the chair of the Senate Banking Committee. It is more likely than not, and we can get into why a little bit more in a second, but Republicans are most likely going to control the Senate, which means that Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina is the most likely candidate to chair the Senate Banking Committee. And he has said that he wants to create a digital asset subcommittee to specifically focus on crypto issues. So on both sides of Capitol Hill, on both sides of the aisle, we're making a ton of forward progress.
Yeah. So now we're getting into kind of like the different committees. But yeah, why don't we start with that Senate banking one? Because obviously Sherrod Brown is that's the race that Fairshake has by far spent the most of its funds on. I saw a graphic, and the amount that was spent on him was like all the way out to here, and then all the others were like close to the x-axis. So it just was pretty stark. They obviously are focusing most of their firepower on that race. We'll talk a little bit about why that particular race is so important to crypto.
Yeah, well, I'll maybe start and then Alex hand it over to you. But so first of all, Ohio is a swing state. And so it's one of the handful of Senate races that have the opportunity to switch from Democrat and go to Republican. I think, to step back at a high level, the Senate has a unique role to play for the crypto industry. One, our greatest enemy, Elizabeth Warren, sits in the Senate. And she sits on the Senate Banking Committee. And so, if the Democrats are in power, she has more power. So this is one of the cases where, yes, crypto is bipartisan, but having a Republican Senate will help us with Elizabeth Warren. The other unique power that the Senate has that the House doesn't have is that they confirm nominees to the agency. So the president will nominate someone, and then the Senate Banking Committee will hold a hearing, approve them, and the full Senate floor will take a vote as well. And so, having a Republican Senate would probably ensure that somebody like Gary Gensler doesn't get back into the administration as Treasury Secretary or as, continuing at the SEC. And so So as you look across the Senate races, you have to remember only a third of the Senate is up every 2 years. They have 6-year terms. Ohio is one of those states where there is an opportunity to make a change. And it's also dealing with somebody who's been in this position of power where he could have stepped up to help the industry and didn't. And so it is, again, this is a pretty aggressive bet. I don't think most industries would, go after and target the sort of sitting chair of a committee. But this is what I guess we're doing as the crypto industry. But Alex has, I'm sure, other things to add.
Yeah, I think this is a particularly difficult call that the folks who are making decisions over at Fairshake made. I think generally speaking, when Kristin and I and our colleagues in the policy community go up to the Hill, we try to assume that there isn't necessarily like malice on the other side of the desk. Maybe there's just a lack of understanding. Maybe someone's misinformed. If we talk to them and we explain crypto, we explain our issues, eventually, it might take some time, but eventually they'll see things our way and understand why this is truly the future of finance and the internet. Sherrod Brown, I think, is a unique example of someone who I think has had plenty of those conversations and to date has yet to show any interest in leaning in. He is a friend and I think ideological ally of SEC Chair Gary Gensler and also of Senator Elizabeth Warren. They have a lot of kind of staff in common, and he's certainly been an obstacle, as Kristin has said, to progress. So that's kind of like the one. And then you look at the split screen of who the guy running against him is. And this is a gentleman by the name of Bernie Moreno. And Bernie built a career kind of building car dealership network across the country. And back in 2018, he decided to use his experience in kind of car titling and everything, and decided to start a company called Champ Titles that actually brings car titles on chain to show provenance and ownership. He also started a crypto incubator in Cleveland to kind of foster a nascent crypto community there. So on the one hand, you have a guy who's been uniquely unhelpful, and on the other hand, you literally have a crypto founder. And so it's a pretty stark contrast. And so the industry decided that a change maybe would be positive. And I think, it's important to look at polling and see what's happening. I mean, Sherrod is I think 12-year incumbent. He has 17-year incumbent. He has an extraordinary ground game. He has amazing constituent services. If you listen to Bernie Moreno talk about Sherrod, he acknowledges it. He's like, look, like, you could have a dyed-in-the-wool Republican who gets into the ballot box and says, you know what, I'm a Republican, but Sherrod Brown was who helped my wife get a passport when we were like trying to get to our kid's wedding in Italy or something like that. So he is like a really big kind of machine in what is a traditionally more red-leaning state. So the expectation is Trump will probably carry the state by 7 to 8 points. Bernie will run a little bit behind Trump. There will be some ticket splitting, folks who are voting for Trump, folks who vote for Sherrod. Right now, I think the last 3 sets of polls, Morning Consult had Bernie up by 1. That was October 15th. ActiVote had him up by 4, October 20th. And then YouGov had Brown up by 2, October 21. So there's been a lot of lead changes. It's going to be really tight. The kind of general consensus is if Trump wins the state by 8 points or more, he carries Bernie over the hump. This is going to be a really tight election. I think pretty much every single race. So we'll wait to see what the overall outcome is.
Yeah, this was something that we reported on here at Unchained. And when you look at the polling over time, Bernie really came from far behind, and now it's really closing the gap. But I do think it probably has to do with the Fairshake money. So one other thing that I wanted to ask about was part of what we reported on was if Brown gets knocked out because of the seniority process for Dems, it actually looks like the next most senior would potentially be Elizabeth Warren. It's like kind of confusing because there's 3 people, but like one of them is not going to win. One of them, you can't chair more than one committee, and they will probably want to do the other one. The last one is not clear because they already chair another committee if they would keep that or want to take the Senate banking. But if they don't want to, then it would be Warren next. Obviously, this only matters if the Democrats keep the Senate, or if in 2 years they retake it. But do you guys have concerns about that, or?
Yeah, so I think we'll take things one thing at a time and cross bridges as we come to them. To put a slightly finer point on kind of what you ran through, which is accurate. So Jack Reed has seniority above Warren. He's the current chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee. John Tester is running in Montana. Of all of the different Senate races that are probably going to break the earliest and most decisively, Montana is probably one of them. So Senate control, you need to have 51 seats, obviously, or 50 plus the White House because the VP is the tie-breaking vote. Joe Manchin in West Virginia retired. Jim Justice, who's a Republican, will win by like 30 odd points. So that's already 50-50. So you need just one more in order to flip Senate control. Right now, Tim Sheehy is running ahead of John Tester in Montana by about 5 points. Trump will win that state by 15 to 20 points or so. So even though polls close earlier in Ohio, you might see a clear winner earlier in Montana. So John Tester gets knocked out, you assume. And then you have Mark Warner, who's the current Senate Intelligence Committee chair. Warner this is a kind of an interesting thing. This is why you have to look through all the different political kind of permutations and incentives and whatnot. Warner is up for re-election next cycle. So in 2026, he's going to be running to keep his seat. And typically speaking, it's way easier to raise a bunch of money for your re-election as ranking member of Senate Banking than as ranking member of Senate Intelligence. So I won't speak for Senator Warner and what he will or won't do, but there's a decent shot that he decides to take the ranking member gavel, which means that Warren is still one seat off. Ultimately, if he decides not to, then Warren will extract a pound of flesh on every single deal, but she does make deals, whereas I think Sherrod Brown's just been totally uninterested in engaging. So you'll maybe make more forward progress. There might be some pain along the way, but it'll be at least progress.
Yeah, I would also add to, and this kind of goes back to what you're asking at the beginning, Laura, it shows that like this really is the most important election. Like we are going to have this opportunity, we think, to go in and get legislation done so we can stop the regulatory challenges and have a pathway forward. And I think that, I think there's a very strong likelihood. I think it's well into the 80% odds on Polymarket that the Senate is under Republican control. So, I mean, the worst case scenario would be to have Elizabeth for somehow like to lose Sherrod Brown and to lose John Tester and to then lose some Republican seats to the point where the Democrats are in control of the Senate and Elizabeth Warren is in charge, right? Like that is the nightmare scenario. But I think that if she is ranking member or if she's just on, the Democratic side of the committee while they're in the minority, then we can still use this opportunity in the short term to get a bill done. But, at some point she will probably chair that committee. And, we need to try to get all of the work. We need to get the framework in place before she gets to that position.
Yeah. The last thing that I would add, too, is you have to also understand how Warren exerts power. So Warren, back in, I think, the 2020 Democratic primary, when Biden ended up becoming the nominee for the Democratic Party, she was also running for president. And she basically cut a deal after she dropped out of the race with Biden. I will throw my support and the support of kind of my progressive coalition behind you in exchange for basically staffing your organization with economic policy staff of kind of my ideological bent. That was how Biden got over the hump against Bernie Sanders. And we've kind of seen the downstream effects of that. There's actually a really terrific Vox article from a couple of weeks ago. I think it's called The Rise and Fall of like New Economic Progressivism or something to that effect. And it describes this whole process. So that's how you got kind of Gary Gensler as SEC chair instead of someone who is maybe a little bit less activist. That's how you got Lena Khan at the FTC. And that's how, like, even if you have someone like, say, Janet Yellen atop Treasury, the staff below her might have gone through the Elizabeth Warren School of Economics. Wally Adeyemo, who's the deputy secretary of the Treasury, was the first chief of staff of the CFPB that Elizabeth Warren stood up. So there's this whole kind of constellation of how do you place people around Washington, D.C. that you can then kind of almost have this call and response across town to orchestrate outcomes. You see that a lot when like Treasury writes a letter to the Hill asking for certain authorities. That's so that folks on the Hill can then write those authorities for them. Oftentimes the folks on the Hill are who are asking Treasury to write that letter in order to do that. So if you assume that there is an administration change, if that's a Donald Trump presidency, obviously all of those people are basically gone from government. If it's a Kamala Harris presidency, there's probably going to be some change at least. Kamala Harris didn't strike that same bargain with Elizabeth Warren that Joe Biden did. So there will be some turnover. It'll be a little bit more gradual, and it's hard to say kind of where it all shakes out. But in either outcome, there's at least some hope that Warren might be somewhat less effective in having reach across town that helps her be more effective on the Hill.
Okay. All right. So in a moment, we're going to talk about the other various committees that could impact crypto policy. But first, a quick word from the sponsors who make this show possible. Polkadot is the original and largest Layer 0 blockchain with over 2,000 plus developers. And the anticipated Polkadot 2.0 upgrade will be a massive accelerator for the ecosystem, upgrading the infrastructure with 8 times higher transaction throughput and twice as fast block times, perfectly tailored core time for the needs of every protocol, trustless bridges internally and into Ethereum, Cosmos, Near, Binance Smart Chain, and revised tokenomics and the implementation of a token burn to reduce inflation. Perfect for GameFi and DeFi to build, grow, and scale with one of the most active crypto communities in the space. Polkadot recently announced a partnership with Mythical Games, bringing top games like NFT Rivals with over 650,000 players and 43 million transactions to pave the way for GameFi and the Polkadot ecosystem. Get your Web3 ideas to market fast with economics that work for you. Think big, build bigger with Polkadot. Join the community at polkadot.network/ecosystem/community. Mantle LSP is a permissionless and non-custodial Ether liquid staking protocol deployed on Ethereum and governed by Mantle. METH serves as the value accumulating receipt token of Mantle LSP and is now the 4th largest ETH LST with $1.3 billion in TVL. In addition to native ETH POS staking yields, METH holders can access various yield opportunities across dApps on Mantle Network L2 integrations and more. METH holders have previously received over 1 million in Icon token airdrops. With the upcoming October 2024 launch of Cook, the new governance token of Mantle LSP, METH holders can start accruing powder rewards under Season 1, Metamorphosis, which will be convertible to Cook. Visit meth.mantle.xyz/campaigns to learn more. Big news for DeFi traders. Robinhood Wallet, Robinhood's non-custodial wallet mobile app, has partnered with Arbitrum to make access to L2 swaps easier than ever. Enjoy gasless swaps and cross-chain swaps on Arbitrum and other networks. The best part? Robinhood Wallet takes no fees on same-chain or cross-chain swaps. Other fees may still apply. With gasless swaps, you can pay network fees with the same token you're swapping instead of ETH. Cross-chain swaps make it incredibly simple to swap crypto without any manual bridging. Download the Robinhood Wallet mobile app today on iOS or Android and join people in over 140 countries exploring Web3 with Arbitrum. Back to my conversation with Kristin and Alex. The next, obviously, the one that we would want to discuss is the House Financial Services Committee. So, talk about the game theory there. Like if the Republicans have the House, who might chair? I mean, we actually touched on this slightly, but obviously I know this one is like, there's multiple contenders, and then we can talk about if the Democrats take the House or have the House.
Sure. So we talked a little bit about the different contenders for House Financial Services Committee chair under a Republican-led House. And I will say that while the Senate, we kind of have a pretty firm idea that it's going to be Republican, the House is honestly anyone's guess. Tons of razor-thin races with a razor-thin majority to begin with, so really could go in either direction. French Hill, I think, is probably the best known to the crypto community. He, as I mentioned, was one of the lead authors of FIT 21, the big crypto market structure bill, and has worked with Chairman McHenry on stablecoin legislation. He also has been the chair of the Digital Assets Subcommittee. So a lot of the crypto-specific hearings, he's been the guy with the gavel asking all the questions and kind of running herd. Andy Barr might be slightly less known. He has taken kind of a more populist approach to kind of some of his policy, which I think lends itself well to his chances with a Trump White House. Either of that, honestly, like there are no bad answers. They're all pretty good answers. They're all great guys who are interested in crypto and who are interested in getting market structure and stablecoins across the finish line. So, I mean, I don't even think that we can pick favorites. They're all great candidates. If House control flips, as Kristin mentioned earlier, Maxine Waters will likely chair the committee again. She has been pretty focused on getting to some sort of deal on stablecoins with Chairman McHenry. There's a chance that gets done before the end of the year during lame duck, which is kind of the weird gray zone after an election, but before all of the new Congress comes in. Remains to be seen. Ultimately, I think this is why next year and next Congress being the most pro-crypto Congress ever is important, because ultimately chairs will reflect the will not only of their voters, but also the will of their conference. And if you have a new majority of your conference that wants to work on crypto issues, if everyone on your committee, except for maybe one or two members, says, I want to work on crypto, it's so popular with my constituents, or it's so important to my state or my district, she's going to sit up and take notice. I think the other piece here, too, is one of the big voices that's been in her staff's ear has been SEC Chair Gary Gensler. And if he's not there anymore, then you don't have that kind of countervailing force that's calling in and doing staff briefings before Fit 21 comes up for a vote, saying this is the worst thing of all time and will ruin securities law forever. In either outcome, the industry will be able to make progress. It just comes down to how quickly do they prioritize it.
Okay. Kristin, do you want to add anything about that committee, or should we move on to the ag committees?
No, we can move on to the ag committees.
Okay. So the next ones, as we discussed earlier, are Senate Ag, House Ag. Why don't we discuss, I guess, we'll start with Senate. It looks more likely, as you said, that Republicans will take that. So
yeah, well, this one is interesting. Maybe we'll start on the Democratic side. Right now we have Debbie Stabenow, who has actually been working very diligently, though sort of quietly throughout the summer, to come up with new market structure legislation. It hasn't been released publicly yet, but she's been doing a lot of work on this space. Unfortunately, she's actually retiring this year. She represents Michigan, and she's decided that she's moving on. I think notably, Fairshake is actually supporting the Democrat in Michigan. Just kind of interesting to note that. But she's going to be gone. So on the Democratic side, the one below her is actually Sherrod Brown. So again, he's also on the Agriculture Committee. I think, if he wins, he would probably want to keep banking over agriculture. And then you have Amy Klobuchar, who could potentially step in and take that position. But she's fairly senior. So it's a little bit uncertain. Notably, Kirsten Gillibrand is on that committee. So she would be obviously an amazing ranking member or our chair of the Agriculture Committee. And so I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Alex, on the Democratic side.
I think the other thing with Gillibrand is she might angle for Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee chairmanship, which is basically the campaign arm of Senate Dems. So if, say, Republicans have won the Senate, Dems are trying to take it back, a really, really great position to fundraise to kind of bring about that outcome is going to be as ranking member or chair of Ag. It would be ranking member given that Republicans had won. But yeah, there's a bunch of great members on the Ag committee.
And just because I don't remember if we discussed this earlier. So Ag, they would be in charge of CFTC, and what are the other areas of crypto they would affect?
Just the CFTC.
Oh, okay.
So if Congress decides to give the CFTC an expanded role, that authority would have to come from the Agriculture Committee.
Okay. And if Republicans take the Senate, then?
Yeah, if Republicans take the Senate, John Bozeman is currently the ranking member. He's from Arkansas, and he's worked closely with Stabenow's office and been in a lot of discussions about how to regulate crypto. So he would likely take over as chairman, I believe, unless you know something I don't. Alex. And, there's a growing number of senators on that committee that are engaged. I think, John Thune and Deb Fisher, Tommy Tuberville, these are, more down dais, but there's a growing sort of interest in the Senate. But I don't know if you have anything to add, Alex, or if we think Bozeman might go elsewhere.
I think it's most likely Bozeman. And as Kristin mentioned, his staff has been working on crypto issues now for quite some time. So this is new to them, and they're excited to dig in. I will say that they may choose first to prioritize passing a farm bill because that was supposed to happen this year and did not. And Bozeman's from Arkansas. He's got a bunch of farmers he represents, and they've got to do one of the other things that the Ag Committee is supposed to do.
Okay. So but then it would only be a little delayed, it sounds like. All right. So how about House Ag?
So House Ag, we have G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania, who's the current chair. He would likely stay as chair. His staff is, if Republicans maintain control of the House. So current chair, current Republican control, G.T. Thompson sticks around. His staff has worked on these issues forever. One of the staffers, Paul Balzano, has been there since the previous chair, Congressman Conaway, and crafted one of the original crypto market structure bills, the Digital Commodity Exchange Act. So this is 2018, 2019. So they've been digging in for a very, very long time. On the other side of the aisle, so if Democrats take control, as we mentioned before, seniority is typically what rules the day on chairmanships. And so David Scott is the Democrat who's currently atop the committee in the ranking member slot. He would potentially be chair. He's been chair before. He's quite close with the CMEs and CBOs and ICEs of the world, all the big commodity derivative exchanges. And is a little bit less inclined towards crypto. There is some question as to his health, whether he would take on this task. And so it might go to a different, further down dais, Dem member, and we could have new blood and new opinions and new options for crypto.
Yeah, and I would say, David Scott, the Agriculture Committee obviously voted on the FIT 21 bill last summer. And in the Agriculture Committee, he allowed that vote to move by voice vote so that the Democratic members wouldn't have to go on record as voting for it or not. But when it did come up for a vote in the House Financial Services Committee, where he also said he voted against it. So maybe not one of our ideal folks, but we'll have to, kind of see who's in power and, if he decides to stick on.
Okay. So then the next one that I think we mentioned was Senate Commerce, and remind us how that could affect crypto policy.
So Senate Commerce oversees tech broadly. So when there's Facebook hearings or Google hearings or what have you, it's typically over at Senate Commerce. NFTs and collectibles kind of fall over there. They have a really, really broad remit. In the House, Energy and Commerce also has kind of energy issues. In the Senate, it has its own separate committee. So Bitcoin mining might be in Energy and Commerce, but it might not be in Commerce. Regardless, with a Republican Senate, Ted Cruz, who's currently in a tight race for re-election in Texas, would be the chair. He's made no secret about his love for Bitcoin and crypto and its importance to his state. So Senate Commerce has kind of sat on the sidelines for a very long time when it comes to our issues. I would expect that to change if he's chair. They'll be, I think, very actively trying to carve out a lane for themselves.
And if he loses, then who might be the Republican who would be in charge?
Well, next in line is John Thune. So it could depend on, what Thune is wanting to do with leadership and others. And then from there, it goes to Roger Wicker. So,
But Wicker's over at, I think, Armed Services. And then you have Deb Fisher, who's also in a tight race in Nebraska, too. So it could be a bigger question mark. But what I will say is if Ted Cruz loses in Texas and Deb Fischer loses in Nebraska, Republicans might not have control of the Senate in general. So we might be having a different conversation entirely.
Okay.
Ted Cruz, I think, latest polling came out this morning, put him, it was New York Times, I think it put him up by 5.
Oh, okay. Okay. So not that tight.
It's been like 1 or 2 points, but yeah, he has been, I think, in the race for his life for the first time in I think quite some time. And so that's part of a broader, I think, demographic and party realignment in Texas.
Okay. So tight, but not super tight. So if the Democrats take the Senate, then who would be in charge of commerce?
I think it would continue to be Maria Cantwell. She's currently the chair of the committee.
And what's her?
She represents the state of Washington.
Does she have any crypto positions?
Nothing too strong that comes to mind.
In either direction?
Mm-mm. She's been really focused on privacy issues mostly. So privacy is like the big ticket item that the Commerce committees have been focused on lately. So it's actually an interesting hook to get into the committee and talk to them about crypto issues, because you can talk about zero knowledge proofs and the ability to attest to information without, showing personally identifiable information.
Okay.
There's a bunch of different kind of issue sets that are within their remit.
Yeah. I mean, I think that crypto generally has a lot of different areas that different people of different political stripes can get interested in. Okay. House, Energy, and Commerce. If the Republicans keep the House, then who would be in charge of this? And what's their take on crypto?
So there's a current race for chair, because Kathy McMorris Rogers, who's the current chair, is retiring. Bob Latta from Ohio and Brett Guthrie from Kentucky, I think, are two of the ones who are making a play for it. Neither have really dug in. I think they've been loosely involved on some of the blockchain bills that Energy and Commerce has looked at this past year. But I think mostly kind of blank slates. Again, this is, our industry has spent so much time inundating ag, banking, house financial services, and so on, that the other committees haven't had quite as much love. But I would expect that to change as more members are interested and excited to dig into these issues. Okay.
And if the Democrats take the House, then?
Frank Pallone, who's the current ranking member, I think would stay on his chair. He's from New Jersey.
He pro or anti-crypto, or does he have any stance on crypto?
I don't think he's been wrapping his arms around it, but I don't think he's been very aggressively anti. Again, it's one of those issues that it just hasn't come up that much on the committee. So most of the members haven't taken really aggressive points of view one way or another, whereas the other might be the case in House Financial Services.
But this kind of goes back to, as new members are getting elected and crypto was supportive of their campaigns and they're more educated on it, we're going to start seeing this sort of broader interest across some of these other committees. And, even the lobbying resources in Washington have grown tremendously in the past 2 years. Prior to that, there just wasn't time to get to all 535 offices, and that's changed. We're very organized as an industry now. We're making sure we're doing outreach to all of the offices because these bills are getting to the stage where they're having votes, and so it's one of the reasons why the political work that's going on with the election cycle is going to be really helpful for next Congress.
Okay, so last two committees would be Senate Finance. If the Republicans take the Senate, then who would be in charge?
So if Republicans take the Senate, it's going to be Mike Crapo, he's from Idaho. He was the banking committee chair. I guess this was 2 Congresses ago, before Pat Toomey. His staff has been leaning in. So he and the current chair, so he's currently ranking member, the current chair, Democrat Ron Wyden, who's been a longtime ally of the industry and has also been just kind of a longtime interested party in the evolution of the internet and freedom to kind of code his speech and so on. Both of them last summer released a joint request for information for crypto tax issues. So we've had meetings with both of their staffs. They're both super interested and dug in and really want to understand this issue set so that they don't when there's a tax bill next year, they don't run into what the Senate ran into back in 2021 with the infrastructure bill, when there was literally an argument about definitions of consensus mechanisms on the Senate floor, and it held up the signature achievement of the Biden administration. So they'd like to not do that again. So both sides have decided to learn their lesson and get the info they need.
Well, and Wyden has been really good too in getting to know the crypto community. Came out to consensus this year, and I mean he's really taken an interest in this, and so yeah, we're not going to see a repeat, as Alex was saying, of 3 years ago with infrastructure.
Okay, so that one, it sounds like no matter which party's in charge, there will be kind of an advocate for crypto and that. And then the last one would be House Ways and Means Committee.
Yeah, this is one where I'm not sure at this stage there's a major difference either way. I don't know, Alex. We currently have Jason Smith on the Republican side, Richard Neal on the Democratic side. This is a committee that historically has not engaged, and even in some of our early meetings, they're still at a very basic level. But I think this is one where there's a huge opportunity for members of Congress to step up, regardless of which party's in charge.
Yeah, I agree. There's a bunch of down dais members who have done a ton. David Schweikert from Arizona, who's currently in a really tight race. He was actually one of the original co-founders of the Blockchain Caucus. Claudia Tenney from upstate New York. Her staff is really terrific and has dug in on a bunch of these issues. Drew Ferguson, who's unfortunately retiring, has introduced some staking tax legislation. But yeah, the chair and the ranking member, so Jason Smith's the chair from Missouri. His staff, they've been there for a very, very long time, super experienced, have started recently to dig more into crypto as they've realized that this isn't going away and we need to learn more about it. It's also become, I think, more politically salient for House Republicans to be pro-crypto. And so they started to sit up and take notice and say, okay, well, maybe we should start being productive. So they've crafted a financial innovation working group to plan for next Congress if they maintain control, and crypto is kind of a subset of that. I think Ron Estes is chairing that. On the Democrat side, so Richie Neal from Massachusetts, so you got to be kind of careful with Massachusetts because obviously it's Elizabeth Warren's home state. He's he might be the dean of the Massachusetts delegation. He's kind of been around for quite some time. He's got very experienced staff. Some of his staff used to work at the IRS, and so they've dealt with the broker tax rule from the other side of the equation. But again, a lot of this, as Kristin said, it's kind of a blank slate. So it's a huge opportunity for the industry to get in and educate, and then also get some of our allies onto the committee and help them be productive and successful.
Okay. And that one, I think, as we mentioned earlier, has an impact on tax policy. And I just wondered, everybody always talks about stable coins and market structure, but is there some kind of potential crypto tax legislation that might be in the works?
Yeah. So I would say less crypto tax legislation and more a bunch of discrete issues that could get factored into an overall tax package. So we're all familiar with the broker rule from 2021 that we've talked about. We're waiting for, I think, the second tranche of implementation or rule finalization this year. There could be adjustments to that get factored in. You could have something like de minimis, which is set a threshold below which use of crypto in payments isn't a taxable event. So if you wanted to buy, or isn't a capital gains event, if you wanted to buy coffee with Bitcoin, for example, you don't want to have to pay capital gains on that. There's a few things around realization. If you stake or unstake an asset and get a liquid staking token in return, is that an asset realization event, or is that just kind of a receipt for equivalent value? If you bridge from one network to another, it could be the same exact asset that's just on a different chain, and you've locked one up on a smart contract on one and released on another. Is that a taxable event? Because you've relinquished control on one, but you've got the same thing on another. And so just clarifying a few of those things around the edges are quite small and won't have any sort of revenue hit, but for the purposes of scoring a tax package, but could be quite impactful from just general clarity for entrepreneurs to be able to operate.
Okay.
And I would say generally it's really, really hard for these individual issues to be enacted into law as like a one-off thing. What happens is they tend to open up tax issues into one big bill and they have to make all the math add up. And they do it all as one. So these are issues where you're never just going to get like the de minimis bill like passed through the House and the Senate and signed into law. You have to have a tax-specific legislative vehicle for those things to go on, because it's just politically impossible to move them as one-offs. And so I think it's going to be, a huge opportunity. And we also want to make sure there aren't, sort of provisions that are introduced that sort of disadvantage crypto in a way that doesn't make sense. And so even just being able to play defense on that front is going to be important.
Yeah, there's two ways to, I think, that tax could play out next year. One is if we have split Congress. So you have one party that controls the White House, you have the Republicans control the Senate, and you have either Republicans or Dems who control the House. You're going to have some horse trading. You're going to have things get in, things get out. But ultimately, it's going to be like a bigger piece of compromise legislation. If Republicans have a trifecta, it unlocks something that's called budget reconciliation, which for budgetary provisions, either like revenue or spending, you can pass that out of the House, and it allows you to pass it through the Senate on only a 51 vote threshold instead of the typical 60 vote threshold that's required to enact any legislation. So if you're Republicans, you have 51 seats in the Senate, or you have the White House plus 50, then you can do a party line vote for that tax package all the way through to the president's desk, which is what they did back in 2017. So that's kind of the other thing that we're waiting to see what happens in a week and a half. Is budget reconciliation going to be possible, or are we doing this kind of big bipartisan horse trading exercise that is going to be a little bit more complicated?
Okay, so now I do want to cover some of the chairs that are going to be most important of the different agencies for crypto. So in a Trump presidency, who do you think he could potentially name as SEC chair?
I think the important thing is it's not Gary Gensler.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most important thing.
But there's no names being batted about?
I mean, there's a bunch of names that have been reported in the press. TBD whether any of those have any credence. Some work in crypto, some work in traditional finance. I think generally speaking, Republicans in the last 4 years, conservative financial regulatory orthodoxy has trended towards kind of pro-crypto. So more or less any Republican appointee you're going to get is going to have a more, I think, nuanced and less antagonistic view towards the industry. Not to mention the fact that Trump has really embraced crypto, and he said he wants to make America the crypto capital of the world and a Bitcoin superpower. So if that's kind of the tone that's being set at the top, you're not going to have someone going totally rogue and not kind of marching in line. On the other side of the aisle, if Harris wins, it's a little bit more of an open question. SEC Chair Gensler has 2 more years on his term. It goes through the end of 2026. That said, it's possible for a president to not necessarily fire, but kind of re-rank. So Harris could theoretically appoint a different commissioner as chair, and Gary becomes just a normal run-of-the-mill chair for or commissioner for the remainder of his time. And there's other ways too that presidents can try and get them out of there. They could, I don't know, name Gary ambassador to the UK, for instance. He'll no longer be at the FTC if that's the case.
Okay, but so of the different contenders under Trump, are any of these names potentially pro-crypto, like Paul Atkins, Heath Tarbert, Chris Giancarlo, who, well, obviously he's crypto dad, Robert Stebbins, and, well, Hester Peirce is, but I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, that's kind of the rumored shortlist that you just went through. I think
Dan Gallagher is the last one. Robin Hood.
All of them would have a pro crypto posture if nominated and confirmed. It would be, I think, an absolutely massive upgrade for any of those names that you listed.
Okay. And what about CFTC chair?
I think CFTC is a little bit less clear. The SEC, everyone's been spending all of their time thinking about, obviously, because Gary is kind of the clear and present danger. If Harris takes over, she could install a new chair. Current chair Benham could stay on. I think to some extent his ability to legacy build has been somewhat constrained by the fact that Gensler is on the other side of the equation. So, I mean, he's appeared before Senate Ag a bunch of times. He's actually an old staffer of Debbie Stabenow, the current Ag Committee chair. So he has wanted to expand the SEC or the CFTC's remit over crypto, and that could be a good outcome if Gensler is no longer at the SEC, but Benham is still there. If Trump wins, I think there's a bunch of different names out there. The two current Republican commissioners, Commissioner Summer Mersinger, she's got some really terrific dissents from some of the recent CFTC actions against crypto. And then Commissioner Pham was actually just at a Blockchain Association event last Monday in New York that I was with Kristin, and she was really terrific and chairs the Global Markets Advisory Council that has a bunch of kind of crypto industry folks on it. So both would be great options. There might be other private sector options too, who are under consideration. Ultimately, the whole transition process is a very, very kind of closed in one because, everyone's jostling for advantage and wants to get these jobs because they're really great and important and consequential jobs.
All right. So then two more that I want to cover are Treasury. Who do you think the different potential presidential candidates might choose for that?
Yeah, well, I think on Harris, we could see the current secretary stay around, but the name that I hear most often is Wally Adeyemo being next in line. He's the deputy Treasury secretary. That's probably one I could see being switched out because, Yellen has served for a long time and should be a priority. But I don't know if there's others you've heard of, Alex, on that list.
Yeah, there was some reporting about former Amex CEO and current, I think, General Catalyst chairman, Ken Chenault. And look, he was at Amex. He understands payments. He's going to be more pro-business than maybe some of the current more Warren-esque regulators, but he might have a very strong point of view about how crypto should look when it's involved in payments. That's a General Catalyst, has a bunch of crypto investments, so who knows? On the Republican side, there's been kind of a bunch of names that have been reported. Senator Bill Hagerty is one of them. He's done a lot for the industry, helped host that crypto roundtable at Bitcoin Nashville. He's a senator from Tennessee and has been kind of the conduit to the Trump admin from the crypto industry or the Trump campaign. Scott Bessent from Millennium, who threw a huge fundraiser for Trump earlier this year, has been one of the names that's thrown around. Bob Lighthizer, who was U.S. Trade Representative, and then Howard Lutnick, who's currently chairing Trump transition. And Howard has made no secret about how much he loves Bitcoin. He has a pretty fiery speech at Bitcoin Nashville about it. Cantor Fitzgerald was one of the first, I think, big finance houses that really dug into crypto, set up a Bitcoin lending desk. They manage Tether's backing reserves. So there's no shortage of good options. And I think it just remains to be seen who President Trump would feel most comfortable with. Okay.
And then Federal Reserve under the two different presidents.
I actually don't know on that one.
Candidly, haven't looked at the Federal Reserve quite as much just because Powell has, I think, Powell's been fine. It's mostly been Michael Barr, I think, the vice chairman for supervision, who's been a little bit less positively inclined towards crypto. That one is a little bit more opaque. And frankly, I think the banks will have a much sharper point of view on who gets into those roles, given all of the kind of the huge tug of war currently over capital standards. The Federal Reserve will come into play if stablecoin issuance is regulated by the Federal Reserve, if stablecoin issuance is regulated by maybe the OCC, which does bank chartering, then this could be a different conversation. Unclear at the moment, I think, who Vice President Harris would appoint, but President Trump, Brian Brooks was the chair last go around and granted Anchorage a bank charter in the waning days of the Trump admin. So by any account, I think there would be probably a more positively disposed comptroller over there. And at the FDIC, I think it really remains to be seen because right now, Christy Goldsmith Romero, who's one of the current CFTC commissioners, is up to lead the FDIC. Her nomination is currently kind of before the Senate. If she gets confirmed before the end of this year, then she'll be chair. If she's not, then Trump will have an opportunity to name one of his own. Or if it's Harris, she might choose to go with Christy Goldsmith Romero, or she might choose to go with someone else entirely. So that one's a little bit less clear.
And Christy Goldsmith Romero is not positively inclined toward crypto, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. I will say more than other anti-crypto regulators, she's at least displayed an openness to learning and taking meetings. And the Technology Advisory Committee, which she chairs over at the CFTC, released a report on DeFi that kind of described the process of decentralization and some frameworks about how to potentially regulate it. So she's open to learning, which is a lot more than I can say about some of the other folks in the government. So never say never.
Okay. Well, last question before we close out. So obviously, as people can tell, it's a little bit of a crapshoot and exactly what's going to happen. Obviously, the House and the presidency are probably more up in the air than the Senate, but still even that, obviously this race, who knows? But what would you say are the chances for crypto legislation in the lame duck?
I think the lame duck is pretty low odds. Potentially stablecoin is on the table. Lame ducks can usually go one of two ways. They're very, very active where a whole bunch of things get negotiated and lumped into a big package and voted out all together. Or they're the opposite. They decide to do the absolute bare minimum and go home early. But I do think stablecoin is on the table for this year. And market structure is something that will most likely get done in the next Congress.
Yeah. As we mentioned, Chairman McHenry is retiring. So he is very much in legacy mode. And I think he'd love to get some crypto legislation enacted. So he and Ranking Member Waters have been, I think, at 90% on stablecoin legislation agreement. The question is what happens over in the Senate. So say you want to attach this to the National Defense Authorization Act, which will usually sails through. It's a must-pass piece of legislation that goes through at the end of almost every year. What happens over in the Senate is the big question mark. So that's why it's important that Senator Haggerty introduced his own stablecoin bill, because that gives like a negotiating anchor for Senate Republicans. So I agree with Kristin. I think odds overall are low, but if anything happens, it's going to be stablecoins.
Actually, there's one other question that I just thought of, which is obviously kind of like stablecoin and market structure sort of overdue as pieces of legislation that the industry has been wanting. But after that, are there other things, or is it really just, those would be good enough and then the crypto industry doesn't need more legislation? Or
yeah, I think that's a good question. So those are two big ones. And listen, they're overdue. Yes, but if you think about stablecoin legislation, those discussions started with Libra in 2019. Most legislation, especially something that's comprehensive and new like this, takes somewhere between 7 and 10 years. Like these things don't happen quickly and they don't happen overnight. So, it's not like we're behind on this, but it is time for us to start getting something enacted into law. I do think, there are the tax issues we discussed earlier that would be helpful to do legislatively. I think, there's a lot of interest around illicit finance, and most of the bills we've seen on that would do more harm than good. I also think there's a really good chance that whatever happens with market structure, that the DeFi question is pushed to later. And so, depending on how that market develops, there may be gaps, that need to be filled with Congress. But I think it's an open question of if we're going to need something, comprehensive for DeFi or not. I think a lot of that will depend on how the market develops.
Okay. All right. Well, you guys, this has been such a fantastic conversation. Where can people learn more about each of you and your work?
Yeah, well, I'll start. You can visit us at theblockchainassociation.org or follow us on Twitter at blockchainassn. We represent about 100 companies in this space, and it has just been really remarkable to see how sophisticated the industry has become. So if you're not a part of us, you should reach out and be a part of the effort.
And for us, paradigm.xyz, all of our policy writings are there, and I'm just at Alexander Grieve on Twitter. I think the last thing that I would leave our listeners with, because the election's in basically a week and a half, is on election night, what I'm going to be watching is, one, Senate control. So Montana, as we discussed, and Ohio. Montana for control of the Senate. Ohio, did crypto have the impact we wanted to have in Ohio? For the presidential, I think everything's going to come down to Pennsylvania. So we'll see how all the other swing states manifest. But Pennsylvania might not know the winner until Saturday. But that is going to come down to Pennsylvania. And then for the House control will probably run through New York and California. So incumbent Republicans in New York, like Mike Lawler in the 17th district, or Mark Molinaro in 19th. In California, David Valadao in the 22nd, Mike Garcia in the 27th. If they're winning, Republicans are likely hanging on to the House. If they're losing, Dems probably take it. So that's how I'm kind of thinking through this. But obviously, we'll see what happens in a week and a half.
Okay, great. Well, it's been a pleasure having you both on Unchained.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks so much for joining us today. To learn more about Kristin and Alex and these upcoming races, check out the show notes for this episode. Unchained is produced by me, Laura Shin, with help from Matt Pilchard, Ron Iranovich, Megan Gavis, Pam Majumdar, and Mark Akuria. Thanks for listening. Unchained is now a part of the CoinDesk Podcast Network. For the latest in digital assets, check out Markets Daily, 5 days a week, with host Noel Atchison. Follow the CoinDesk Podcast Network for some of the best shows in crypto.